This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. Welcome to the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. I'm your host, co-founder and editorial director of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, Jamie Bogner. I am in Austin, Texas for another socially distant but in-person episode of the podcast. And I'm sitting in the tap room of Live Oak Brewing with head brewer Dusan Kwiatkowski.
Hey, Jamie.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. We love Live Oak and have loved Live Oak for a number of years. And Live Oak has, of course, been a past Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine Beer of the Year. We were out here in 2018 for our Brewers Retreat, and Chip gave us all a tour. It's just a beautiful brewery with beautiful beers.
Back for more.
For most of the brewer friends that I know that travel in and outside of Austin, for whatever reason, because of your proximity to the airport, it tends to be everyone's first and last stop, when they are traveling to Austin, and for good reason, because everything from Pilsner to Hef to pre-war pills to, even the smoked beers are absolutely fantastic and, become wonderful beer expressions of craft lager. So we're going to talk about that today on the podcast. We're going to talk about Live Oak's approach to some of these classic and older lager styles. And imagine we'll talk a little bit about Grodziskie because that's a big focus for you all. Can't wait to talk about it. We have to. We can talk about some, pre-war or pre-prohibition kind of, pills approaches. I know that you've got some fun stuff in the works, and we'll see where else the conversation takes us. But first, as the brewing industry's premier choice for glycol chilling, G&D Chillers has set the standard on quality, service, reliability, and dedication to their customers' craft. New this year, redundancy meets efficiency. G&D's micro-channel condensers are built with all aluminum construction, which eliminates galvanic corrosion. Using half the refrigerant of conventional condensers with fewer brazed connections translates to a lower GWP and less opportunity for leaks. Call G&D Chillers today to discuss your project or reach out directly at gdchillers.com. This episode is also brought to you by RAR North Star Pils, a new base malt to set your compass by. RAR North Star Pils is crafted for brewers looking for a domestic Pilsner malt with low color and low modification. North Star Pils carries overtones of honey and sweet bread, supported by flavors and aromas of hay and a nutty character. Suitable for any beer style, but particularly craft brewed versions of classic lagers. Let RAR North Star Pils guide your craft by visiting bsgcraftbrewing.com or contact them at 1-800-374-2739. So, Dusan, let's...
That malt's on our list. We'll make a Pils with the North Star at some point this year.
It's on the list. Do you have a running list of ingredients that you're intrigued to explore and use and test out?
Yeah, it's, I guess, pretty extensive. We make Pils and Hef, and then for the tap room and beer garden, we'll pump out some 20 barrel batches with our old facility, small tank cellar. We've got like 3 little horizontal lager tanks. So we'll, as much as we can, we can do like, 9, 10 a year maybe. We can't quite get through them fast enough. I think we're adding to the list faster than we're crossing them off, but that one's on there.
That one's on the list. Talk to me a little bit about your background in brewing and the path that you took to get here at Live Oak.
Like many, I was home brewing in college with a couple buddies, went on some gear, and we made some English beers, and I never made lager beer. And then I think a little right after college, I was just trying to figure out what did I want to spend time doing and make some money. And I actually went over to Uncle Billy's on Barton Springs Road, and I was actually pestering Swifty, and he spent some time with me at the bar, and we were talking about beer, and he sent me over to Main Root, was making root beer in the back of White Mountain Yogurt, which was our neighbor at the old facility. And I talked with Mark was running the show over there, and he was like, I don't need anybody to make root beer, but Julie and Steve were in production over at the old place, just the two of them, and Chip was running it from the office, and they needed an extra set of hands, and I talked with Steve for a little while, and so Steve Anderson ended up hiring me. And so I started working there full time, just washing kegs, 12 plus years of on the job training.
Talk to me about the kind of the broader history of Live Oak. It was 1996, I believe, founded.
Yeah, it started by Brian Peters and Chip McElroy, and Swifty is Brian Peters, who I just mentioned earlier. But sold the first beer in April of 97, Czech Pils, and been making it ever since. We did 18 years at the old place. We are still self-distribution in town. We have a little more help these days in the surrounding areas, and we have a distributor in Houston, but that's been a big part of our business that entire time. And we were draft only until we moved to our new place in 2015. And that was a big learning curve, but we did just about 10,000 barrels a year of draft beer, mostly Hefe, a lot of Pils.
And you have a beautiful, it's a Braucon.
Yep, 75 hectoliter Braucon cooker, 3 vessel and a whirlpool. Works like a dream, makes bright clear wort. We love it. The old brew house is out in the field on the disc golf course. It has...
There's the old brew house graveyard around the yard here at Live Oak.
It's our museum. All those tanks are out to pasture. They're more valuable as a museum piece than operation.
You couldn't saddle another brewer with those. You just couldn't do it, huh?
That would be bad karma.
And so this brewery is designed, and you all designed it from the ground, or Chip designed it from the ground up to brew, Pils and Hefe. What are some of the kind of concerns that you all, that Live Oak, considered in kind of designing a brew house, knowing that you had some specific, beers, to make? And I only ask that question because, a lot of breweries have a brew system and brew across such a wide range of styles. I think it's always interesting when you've, brewing a more narrow range and more focused thing, and what you can do in that kind of context to kind of create the right brewing environment for the beers that you make. Sure.
Yeah, we're brewing, what is Pils with the amber lager, and the Hefe is 90 something % of our volume, a little bit of different wacky stuff for the tap room, but we're brewing beers with, 1,000-year tried and true tested, Bavarian, Central European styles. So trusting the engineers and the manufacturers making the beer over there, with our equipment that we were going to implement over here. There's probably more stuff that I didn't know that I don't know that I don't have to worry about than I do with all their equipment. And I mean, it works great.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think with the construction of the new place in 2015, I mean, this was a field, so we built everything how we wanted it. We learned a thing or two and maybe wouldn't do it some things the same way, but generally we got it right. It was myself and Chip and our facility manager at the time, John Luck. Yeah, it was 2014 was we basically hired the team, engineers, architect, and did all the designing, and then 2015 was building, and there's parts of 2015 that I don't remember because it went so fast.
Right. Well, you've got a large fermentation cellar with a whole slew of horizontal fermentation vessels, and obviously a multi-4, vessel brew house system up here on a deck.
Well, I'll add one thing about the new place and all the changes that we had with all the new equipment and new everything. the thing that really kept me from being, over the edge, anxious, nervous about the flavor of beer out of the new place was that we kept our fermentation our yeast handling and fermentation the same, which is so much of it. And then the degree of improvement with the wort quality from the old cooker to this thing is extreme, but in a, extremely positive. When we were tasting the first batch, when it was like not even finished fermenting all the way, I was just so curious how it was going to taste. It tasted incredible, so much better than the wort at the old place.
What did that process look like for you of testing the new system with those recipes that you all knew so well, and then dialing in those recipes on a new, larger, and in many cases better system?
We got off on the right foot with the German, brewmaster and the commissioning team. Those two guys, they were like, "Oh, you're making a Pils and a Hefeweizen. Okay, this is like start here, and then make some tweaks." And so it was like everybody's familiar with it. It's like, yeah, we're not trying to reinvent anything. We're just copying.
Oh, that's one way to make it sound so simple. But that's nice. The manufacturer at least had some kind of specs and ideas for, how to start. How many batches did you have to brew on it before you were really, you felt like you had it dialed?
I think we sold the first batch of Hef. I mean, there's like, with the alcohol being good and, the yeast was we knew what to expect there. It was just kind of getting the bitterness in, and it's so low hop bitterness. I mean, you're throwing in like a handful of hops, even in like a 60 barrel batch. So, so that was easy. The Pils took a couple brews to get the hops right because the boil technology.
Efficiencies were so much better.
Yeah, the efficiency, just the way it boils, the clarity of the wort too. I mean, we didn't have to use as many hops because it was just like boiled so much better, and the wort was so much brighter. It was extreme.
I'm curious as to like how a different heating element in your kettle could change the brightness of the wort that you create.
Well, we were, I think, burning it at the old place.
Okay.
A little bit. I mean, I'm being very critical, but yeah, the new cooker has an internal calandria. It pumps the wort, and there's no scalding. There's and I mean it's maybe not necessarily the boiling as much, but I'm kind of talking about the brightness of the hops.
Okay.
Just right. With the clear wort, there's no gunk in the way. The old ladder tun was letting just tons of porridge through, and that it's just compared to like bright wort in the kettle here.
Right.
Sorry.
When let's talk about Pils and Pils itself. This the beer that you call Pils, and that's Pilz.
Yep.
Is designed as a Czech style Pilsner.
Yep.
Where did the original inspiration come from? 2.5 decades ago, back in the mid '90s, when Live Oak developed the recipe for the beer, and has it changed or evolved over those couple decades?
Biggest change is probably the equipment that we have here now.
Right.
But it was initial inspiration. I know Brian and Chip, they were nerdy about it from the beginning. Before I worked at Live Oak, this is kind of a segue, but when I was in school at University of Texas, I had a studio class with a friend. I had two 4-hour studios on whatever day it was, and my friend worked at the Cactus Cafe, which is a bar on campus, just off the drag or on the drag, and he would work, and I would just go with him to work afterwards, and they had Pils on tap, and so I would just drink Pils. Because he would give me whatever, every other Pils or more for
sure
for free. But I just I was hooked on Pils, and that was like when I realized it was Brian Peters that I was talking to at Uncle Billy's.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, putting the pieces together a little bit later, I was like, wow, but from the drinking side to the and then coming over to the making it side, it's, the mash is really fun. We were just doing a single decoction at the old place. We were moving it into the kettle with a positive displacement pump and scraping it around with a giant paddle and then sending it back into the mash lauter. Now we do a double decoction, boil it twice. When we started making our German pills, which is just a step infusion, no decoctions, and we started using it with the same Czech barley, even though we're using German barley now for the gold. But the difference in color and flavor just from the decoctions is pretty significant.
How would you describe it?
It's noticeably darker. It's a fuller, with the Czech yeast, it doesn't attenuate as much. It's a fuller flavor. There's more malt flavor. Subtle malt flavors are hard to describe, but
sure.
You have to do the volume test. You just drink 4 half liters and and then you'll know. It's like how fast are you drinking it?
Because having talked to Swifty, he is not a decoction fan and takes the opposite approach to that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm curious, it is interesting, obviously being here at Live Oak where he got his start and, watching those kinds of contrasts evolve, and both processes seem to make really good.
I don't know. Did he say that's why he left? There was an argument over doing decoctions or not.
I think it was over horizontal fermenters, from what I understand.
Uh-huh.
He didn't want to have to harvest yeast on horizontal fermenters anymore.
Yeah, that's the pain in the ass.
But I imagine you wouldn't go to the trouble to do it if you didn't feel like it made a difference in your beer.
Sure. And then, I guess we're kind of defaulting to, the fucking Czechs do it, so we got to fucking do it.
It's interesting what pieces of that kind of historical precedent American brewers pick on, because we have the liberty of picking and choosing those pieces of tradition and then focusing on certain ones or others. And then, conveniently letting some others, move off to the side. And again, there are ways to make really compelling beers with these different techniques, but I'm just curious about why
the pain in the ass factor doesn't really matter whether we do it or not, or we usually, if it's a pain in the ass, we usually do it.
Let's find a way to make it harder for ourselves. Yeah. When you taste pills from Live Oak, how does it convey to you? Do you all, and how from a brewery standpoint, as you all are tasting and evaluating each batch, how do you all move through that process? Do you have definitions for it? Do you, or standards that you all have developed, and how do you maintain those kinds of standards or judge each batch and say, hey, this is it?
It's been a couple of years since we made kind of a significant change where we moved our decoction steps, where we were doing our second decoction to heat up to mash out temperature instead of kind of a prolonged protein rest and a beta decoction moving boil heating step. I don't know, looking at the color, the Maillardiness of it without it being, tasting like it's suffering with attenuation, needs to be bitter.
Who does that evaluation of every batch before it gets packaged and goes out?
Well, I drink all of them. All our production guys are tallying up the attributes with finished packaged beer for sure.
Okay.
Everything goes into the draft lab shelf and gets a tongue on it. Through the pipeline, it's mostly just the cellar crew and me. But anytime anything goes in the bright tank,
But you use Draft Lab software to kind of measure and track some of this?
We do, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And then how do you train all your all the brewery staff who are tasting these things and evaluating and making their notes?
You make them drink their weight in pills every month for their first 2 years, and then they know. No, I
Within legal,
sure.
confines, of course.
There's me and 10 guys in production. 6 of them are packaging. We've got 4 cellar brewers, and they've all been here for like 6 or 7 years. So
they
we're
just
kind of
they feel it.
It's like, yeah, until somebody, shakes it up and leaves, and we got to get some new, and everybody's kind of trained up. I don't know. We're kind of all on the same page, which is, fortunate, because it's got to be a lot of attention to training somebody new. That's always a hard thing, but
right. Well, let's shift some gears here and talk about a subject that I think is pretty close for you, and that's historical lager styles. It's something that you all have focused on. Pre-war pills is a big thing for you.
Yeah.
And and let's delve into some of those kind of different and more historical lager styles. But first, the world of craft beer is a different place now. Margins are more important than ever, so why not lower your ingredient cost? Craft juice concentrates from Old Orchard are the cost-effective solution for your fruit-forward needs. Old Orchard produces high volumes of their retail juice brand, so economies of scale keep prices low for their bulk supply program. A little concentrate goes a long way, and you won't lose some of it through filtering like you would with purees. To start increasing your margins now, head on over to www.oldorchard.com/brewer. Also, for years, Brewery DB has been the industry's only professionally curated source of brewery and beer information. In 2019, over 1 million taproom visits were made by craft fans searching for breweries on brewerydb.com. In early 2021, Brewery DB will unveil an all-new experience to help craft lovers get back on the brewery trail. To take full advantage of the enhanced marketing power of Brewery DB and to increase your taproom traffic, visit marketmybrewery.com. That's marketmybrewery.com. It's easy and it's free. So, Dusan, talk to me a little bit about, adding some of these more historical lager styles into the Live Oak lineup.
So we got the Czech pills and the German pills and a couple other little pills, and then we decided that there was a big hole because there's a lot of beer history in America. So having an early American Pilsner, which we've been kind of digging into and learning about, a lot of the late 1800s, early 1900s beer history, and we got it was CBC and DC a couple years ago. The Lost Loggers Club over there. We got kind of like a recipe, very simplified recipe ratio. It was talking about using like 40% corn grits in an American Pilsner, and we're like, whoa, that's a lot of corn grits. And it's like, well, that's basically a recipe. Let's see what it tastes like. So we made a batch, and we're using a little less than that. We're using like 35-36%. But it's, and we're calling it pre-war pills because in Texas, that was a term that you were until recently not allowed to put on a label because it referred to like pre-war strength. It's like higher alcohol beer, and there's some words and stuff that the alcohol authorities crossed out. But I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago but Chip really wanted to take advantage of that term, using that term, because pro is the well-known term. But it was, I think beer wise, you think pre-prohibition, but life wise, the war was, a bigger deal to a lot of people, and so it was pre-war strength, and so that's why we decided to go with pre-war. It's a little bit more encapsulating, not just beer industry.
Talk to me about the kind of fundamentals, how you built recipes around that kind of pre-war idea of Pilsner. or pills?
Generally, having the adjunct to one of the biggest differences and why it caught on is with when you get your high protein 6-row and you're throwing grits in there, you can polish that beer. I mean, we use lenticular filters, which, they do a great job for us for the volume of lager beer that we pump out. They're pretty beefy as far as lenticulars go, but they can polish our pre-war corn lager up sparkly bright. And it's just a tiny bit of haze that will be on the Czech Pils or the German Pils or the amber lager. They're really clear, but they're not sparkly crystal, catch your eye out of your peripheral bright. And, that I think was a big part of why they caught on back then. It was like, look sparkly bright, light on the tongue, tastes light, compared to the heavy all malt, yeasty, ales that were predominant before that started to catch on. And so we were going to, try it out with the traditional 6-row barley. And if we could get 6-row barley for, as cheap as we can get our base malt, we would do it. But ultimately we're using our same base malt for it. But we're, we talked about this earlier, but we're excited to try Matt Riggs 6-row barley later in the spring, just to try flavor, because we tried it once. We used a Canadian 6-row from RAR. Flavor wise, I don't know, it seemed a little harsher, that batch. It was a little, I don't know, huskier, grainier, but I think the malt was a little chaffy and a little old when we tried it. So, you try something once, it's hard to form a full conclusion on it if it's like really not that off, but maybe we'll try it again.
Yeah, it's harder and harder to even find 6-row these days, huh?
Right. Yeah, that was the only one I could find.
Yeah.
So, and it's, for that reason, it's kind of like, well, I don't, maybe this malt was sitting around for a while. It's like, it was half chaff when I dumped it out, and then, a little lower bitterness compared to the German Czech Pils, kind of, American macro bitterness levels, maybe a little more aroma flavor, but it's like 24 IBUs, I think.
What's the hopping approach to that in terms of hops that you use?
Our hop use in general is pretty simple. It's Saz and Sladek for the Czech Pils. Sladek's like a little higher alpha Saz equivalent. Very good. And then Middle Fru, and we use Northern Brewer for our higher alpha bitterness, but that's it. So we use Middle Fru and we love it. So pretty much all our, Big Bark, Hefe, Gold, pre-war, it's all Middle Fru.
Mm-hmm. With the pre-war, there's an involved process to get corn to the point where you can brew with it. Talk to me a little bit about that alternate process of cooking your corn grits.
Yeah, the brewer's grits are de-germed, get the oil out of there, and then we don't have a corn mill, so we get it milled up for us. But the mash is, we're making a big pot of grits. I think it's 400 kilos of corn grits goes into our 60 barrel batch of pre-war, and we'll mash it in with a little bit of barley. Those enzymes keep it from getting too thick. The first time we made it, we didn't put a little bit of barley in there, and it was corn magma. You could feel the bubbles in the brew platform.
You say a little bit of barley, like how much is a little bit?
Like 30 kilos and 30 kilos out of 800 kilos.
Yeah.
And then you don't need to go all the way up to 100 C. So we take it up to 94 C, and then cool it back down manually as cold as we can get it into the not quite down to 50C for the protein, but I think we get like 54, 55. It's as cold as we can get it, and then take it through all our steps of our regular step mash.
Fermenting that beer, does it behave any differently in the cellar due to the different mash composition, or the kind of light brightness of the beer itself, or is it pretty typical with the rest of your lagers in that similar range?
That's kind of all the same. I think look. It's one of this one. I look at it, I guess, so much I don't know how to explain it. It attenuates a little bit more, I think, is the only difference.
Yeah. Well, let's change gears again and let's talk a little bit about Grodziskie. Now, this is another passion project for Live Oak because, let's say that style of beer is not one that American drinkers are just like begging brewers to make for them. It is definitely a labor of love and a beer style that you fell in love with.
So it popped up on our radar, a blip from our friends in Krebs, Oklahoma. They smuggled some of the Polish ale yeast from the Polish homebrewers when the Browar Grodziskie closed in 91, and then it was like in the 2000s or something. They brought it back and they made a batch of Grods, and we've always loved smoked beers from going to Bamberg and drinking them, and smoked beers like time traveling beer wise. You're like going back to the cowboy campfire. Everything smells like body odor and campfire, but it's the beer part, and the beers are extremely well made. So that's they're already good, and then smoke is just kind of an extra flavor complexity. And so we were like, oh, it's a smoke beer, let's check it out. Maybe we should make one of these. And we were making 30 barrels of draft only at the old place, and 30 barrels of draft only Grodziskie was, I think we eventually made a batch, but I don't think we sold it all. Yeah, so I think we made a batch, and it was the environment was offering their oak smoked wheat malt, which let us do it. I think our old ladder ton was rough, but the new ladder ton, which is already oversized because we're making tons of Hefe, so we got it extra wide for all our wheat laddering. Making a batch of Grods over here is, you have like a 4-inch louder bed, so it's 100% wheat. It's not a problem. It louders as fast as the pills. Sorry, I'm kind of jumping around. But so in 2017, we canned the Grods, and we brought it to the CBC in Nashville and got it to a guy who brought it to some Poles. And so we were there on their radar making Grodziskie over here. And we learned that the original Browar brewery was, all except for the malting, which they did on site, was restored, and Browar Fortuna was running the Grods brewery, and so they were contracting the smoke malt from Czech maltster that had the smoking capabilities, and they were making Grodziskie beer again over there, and we were like, oh, holy shit. And they got their hands on some of our beer, and they reached out to us, and in 2018 we went over there to make a beer with those guys and just absorb all the Grods beer history. And when we were making it, we would get a batch of the Polish ale yeast from the lab and prop it up and use it. And I don't know if it was just because it was like a one prop use. It's like ideally you're using it and kind of, it's not just waking up and then fermenting. It's because it's like 8 Plato beers, so it's a little on the low nutrient side too. But when we started trying it with our lager yeast, which we were doing for a period of time, we were splitting the batch and making half of it with the ale yeast and half of it with the lager yeast, and blending it in the slack from the ale yeast because it didn't quite ferment as well. the lager yeast cleaned up in the conditioning tank, and it was like a set it and forget it, mix 50-50 in the conditioning tank, and you'd get a spoon batch of Grodziskie at 3 volumes. But the Grods that was made with the lager yeast was, great, super clean. And one of the things that the Grods brewers was like, it kind of doesn't matter as much what yeast you use as long as it is, a clean, healthy fermentation and it's a clean yeast. So we were kind of like empowered to switch it over to entirely lager yeast, which I think has made the beer even better. It's yeast that we have all the time. It's happy. We know how it performs. It's super clean. So our Grods is just 100% lager these days. It has been for a little while, and it's also kind of a thinner wort or whatever. I mean, it's 100% wheat, but good lagering, cold tank. We're able to get that one pretty sparkly bright too. So that's like a champagne, the Polish champagne is what they call it.
And that grist bill, it's all wheat malt. Is it all smoked wheat malt, or is it partially smoked, partially not?
There's a little bit of variation in the smoke. Sometimes we'll use 100%. Sometimes we'll use like 90% and top it off with just wheat. They do, the malt house they do like a truckload of smoked malt twice a year. And so we buy their kind of extra malt, which is enough for us to make Grods for the year, once or twice a year. We get the malt. Which is great for us. And we went to the malt factory when we were over there. It's in Bruntal, Czech Republic. So there's a little, they do their barley production, and then they kind of like switch over, clear it out, get the wheat in there. They do 3 batches is a truckload. And so they do the first batch, get the fire going. The second batch is the smokiest. And then the third one, they're kind of like winding down the fire. So, and they bag them separately. And so you kind of, depending on which one we get, if it's the first one, it's not a smoky, so we'll use all of it. If it's a second one, we'll top it off with a little bit of wheat. But depends on who you ask here, if it's smoky or too smoky. But it also depends on what you just drank beforehand, because if you drink a smoked beer and then you drink Grods, it's fine.
Doesn't taste smoked at all.
Yeah. Smoke is probably, having made so much smoked beer and trying it with other beers, it's such a elusive flavor to describe and grasp and go from person to person.
That sounds like a great entree to continue talking about smoked beer, how you're using it. I mean, I love the idea that, the idea for a lot of brewers of 100% smoked malt sounds insane and over the top, even though, I think most who brew with it understand that it doesn't quite work that way. And it's not just a, linear scenario where the more smoked malt you use, the more smoky a beer tastes. Let's talk a little bit more about that. But first, ABS Commercial is excited to be a part of today's podcast. ABS is a full brewery outfitter offering brew houses, tanks, keg washers, and small parts. As a part of ABS Commercial's ongoing Give Back campaign, they'll be giving away an ABS Keg Viking keg washer in June, so make sure to periodically check the ABS Commercial Facebook page to find out when the contest opens up and how you can enter to win a Keg Viking. So coming back from that break, now we've got glasses of Groats in front of us so we can enjoy drinking them while we talk about them a little bit more. So Dusan, I have to admit, I'm helping Stan Hieronymus cheat on you this year because he is committed to having Groats in his best of list for craft beer and brewing, and has done that, I think, 3 out of the past 4 years. He included another smoked beer in this past one, but then when Mary Kemper sent us a note about them releasing a Groats themselves, I just sent her a note and said, hey, I think you ought to send one to Stan, because he's always looking for a Groats to talk about. And so
that should be a requirement if you're packaging Groats in a mailable box, to send it to Stan.
It really should. So I'm sorry that, I've kind of made it easier for him to cheat on you on that. Um, but I imagine that your growth will find its way back into, other means of him to mention it in the future. But let's talk about smoked beer. Obviously,
I'm
this is,
just glad people are, that the style is proliferating. Same
well,
thing with the Polish, the Polish Grods brewers. They were like, yes, just as much Grods, the Grods gospel, as much as whoever wants to try the malt to make the beer, like that's the whole reason for bringing the brewery back to life. So
they don't care that you're kind of taking their thing and running with it.
no, not at all. The opposite. They're just glad to see people out there doing it. And we were trying to do some Grods collaborations wherever we can.
Trying to turn more brewers on to brewing this.
Yeah, those that can sell whatever their brew house volume is of it, which can be a tall order depending on the market. But
Sure.
I mean, in Texas, it's hot as fuck in the summertime, and this beer is like sometimes keeps you alive if you're, especially wanting to get some vitamin D, you need to stay hydrated. So, and with the whole, barbecue history of Central Texas, it just fits so well. And
That really is true. Like here, given that people are so used to the flavor of smoke, through smoked meats, that it becomes a natural thing. And, and of course, if you were to drink one of these with some heavily smoked brisket, you may not even sense the smoke flavor in the beer quite as much.
yeah, it might just be just like a low gravity Pilsner. I mean, you have a couple of them and it kind of turns into that anyway. When you kind of get used to the smoke, it kind of fades. It can fade away and come back. It's not for everybody though. Some people hate it, which is fine.
No, it is interesting is that I keep taking sips, you're right. It doesn't, the phenolic piece stops being the, kind of primary and dominant thing. And you start noticing even like lightly fruitier flavors that, that start to develop or, as the sharpness kind of, falls away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that was a big, kind of a big difference when we started switching and using the Bruntal smoked wheat malt, that it was like the smoke profile was like a delicate kind of, it's oak smoke is what they use, and it's like a kind of a delicate fruit wood smoke. Yeah, we just fell in love with it. We're so glad we have access to it to make this beer, because now it's, I mean, extremely traditional. I think the only thing that we don't do that they do is, and just because we don't really have them, but they use very old high beta acid hops for their bittering for preservative. So it's like heavily hopped, smoke cured, lasts forever sort of deal. And it does, we've noticed that the shelf life is improved with this beer for those reasons, I guess.
Yeah. As you were trying to get it completely dialed, what did you find to be a couple of the most important factors or pieces, whether that is recipe or whether that's technique, in order to get it to express in the way that you really wanted it to feel expressive? And it sounds like the malt, using the right malt, was a big piece of that. Were there
Yeah, that was a huge piece. The Christoph, the one of the guys, brewers responsible for bringing the Grods brewery back, his specialty is in malting, and so he worked with the maltster to develop the malting recipe with based on the old Grods brewery malting recipe pieces that he could find. I don't know if he had the whole thing. I think he had to come up with some of it, but he smithed it back to life, and it's malted as close as it was when they were making it too. So it's it's all in the the details with that part of the beer production. They do use an ale yeast, but it's extremely clean, and it drops brighter. It drops like bright. Our lager yeast doesn't quite drop bright, but we filter it and it's sparkly, just like champagne.
That's really rather interesting that you could make a groats both with ale yeast or lager yeast, and that it is less about the family of yeast and more about the end experience of the beer.
Mm-hmm.
With those lager or with those ale versions, is there any, I imagine it's, probably something close to, Kolsch yeast, that performs like that. Are there other issues?
Yeah, it's something like that. It's extremely clean. I mean, I like to think I can fucking bust somebody who's like, this is a lager. That's like, no, that's not a lager. But I don't know if I could tell with that one. I mean, there's, some I can't tell, but
any issues about, the way that these varying yeasts, create other flavors along the way that either work in connection with or that you have to be careful about?
I mean, the only thing that I'm kind of aware of in the cellaring of the Grods is if we move it just a little too early. I mean, I guess the whole deal with moving lagers to conditioning is a little bit of sugar for spunding it up, but not too much. Don't want to take over too much yeast, but if it goes over a little early, you can get a little sulfur that'll stick around, and the smoke and the sulfur kind of teams up to be quite a potent
little fire and brimstone right there.
Yeah. The smoke, I think, is just like makes you extra aware of the sulfur, which being, a lager enthusiast, I sometimes crave it. I don't think it's, just a pinch is fine, I guess. But it shouldn't be too sulfury. So that's the only thing we're kind of extra sensitive to with the Grods or any of the smoked beers. Yeah.
With some of your other, smoked beers, and as I'm, looking at the tap board right here, you've got some real consumer hits like Heller Rauch and Schwarzer Rauch. Like big selling beers up there on the tap room wall.
Yeah, we're forcing them on everybody. If we just make them all smoke beer, then whoever comes here to drink beer just either has to drink beer or go home empty-handed.
I did love it a couple of years ago when you all showed up at the Great American Beer Festival, and your pouring lineup consisted of 4 smoked beers and nothing else. It was a definitive statement. It was a
that's our
true fans only.
Yeah, that's our MO. Yeah, January is our, we didn't really have a party this year, but normally every year we have a big Rauch Fest, and we brew most of our beers in December, January. We have our smoked merits in the fall, that if there's still some, we'll pour it in January. But we've got maybe too many smoked beers on tap. Yeah, we made a smoked malt beer this year. We made a smoked ale. We made a smoky version of the Hefe one time. Schlenkerla makes a Weiss beer that's smoked, so we were trying that. We weren't crazy about the Hefe yeast phenols with the smoke. Similar to the sulfur smoke combo. I'm not a fan of that particular combination, so we didn't make that one this year. But smoking in lager beers, it's we just couldn't help ourselves. And we're even coming out with another smoked beer in March that's a smoked Bock beer, a pale Bock that's smoked with 25% corn grits. So we're just, we're going nuts because I don't think that's a beer that existed before. We kind of made that one up.
Who are you brewing these beers for?
I think we're brewing them for Chip, so he's got a lot of beer drinking to do.
Yeah. I mean, it does fit the brew beer that you love to drink kind of model, I guess.
We are, we're trying to offer a slice of, this is like our, just like the Bavarian, Austrian, Czech, Polish, we're honing in on the Bamberg smoked beer thing and just bringing it over here and just, blowing it up to a point where it's like, hey, it's a thing. Come try it out. I don't drink smoked beers every day. I drink a lot of Grods, but I don't drink, Hellbach every day. But, it's nice to try it with, having people come out and you just have an experience with it and just be open-minded about it. I think it's one of the reasons why we took all the smoked beers to the festivals. It's like people are there at a festival and that's kind of the best reception is people are there to try different things and see what else is out there. And so they're kind of more receptive, already more open-minded. We don't have to, surprise somebody at the grocery store shopping for eggs. Like, hey, try the smoked beer. And they're like, ugh, no, thanks. Gross.
Well, there's also something to be said, I think, for finding something that you all like to make and like to drink and then just going pretty hard in it, for the same reason that everyone, when you hear the words smoked beer, everyone in the beer world thinks of Schlenkerla, and even you directly reference them, like, because it is so Schlenkerla, so synonymous with smoked beer. If you keep at it, Live Oak will continue to be synonymous, with smoked beer in the United States.
Yeah, we're working on our Bamberg on the Colorado identity.
And that Colorado River is the river that brewery backs up to.
Yeah, the Colorado River runs adjacent to our property. Yeah, that's why I mentioned that. You can't, wade into it, but you can see it.
Yeah.
Very steep drop into it. But
for somebody that might be out there tackling their first smoked beer, what advice would you give to them, as they are trying to develop a recipe and figure this out?
I think you want to have the beer dialed in, and then the smoke would be like the last ingredient. Like you don't want to try a new beer with a new yeast and have too many variables if you're going to be, because you're already kind of, I don't think it's no secret that smoked beers aren't flying off the shelves, but
so you're saying
the base beer,
dial in your Schwartz and then add the Rauch component, but make sure that your Schwartz tastes the way you want it to before you change that malt piece in it.
Yeah, because if, you give somebody a beer that's smoked and then the beer itself is, aside from the smoke, flawed, you're doomed.
And as you then add that smoked malt component into it, are there any concessions or changes that you make to that as you do it?
I don't know. I guess it's just the brewer's preference for where you want to start out with smoke potency, but we've used a couple of the Beechwood smoked malt varieties or malt manufacturers. We really like the best Beechwood smoked malt. It's a little bit more potent because we're, I guess, a little more seasoned on it, so we're not afraid to go a little more heavy-handed on it. And then, we are like trying to imitate Schlenkerla, and they are that beer is smoky. It's not subtly smoky, so that's kind of what we're going for. If you're thinking about, cooking one up, I'd start a little lighter, I think. I don't know. It's up to you, I guess.
Sure.
You could make it make a statement, and but I think the biggest thing is to have the base beer be good.
After smoked beers and after obviously the kind of pre-war 6-row and corn things that you're working on, are there any other brewing projects that are getting you especially excited these days?
I think we're all really enjoying kind of operating in the very subtle realm of, subtly different pilsners.
What kind of subtle differences are you tweaking on some of these different pilsners?
I don't know. I don't want to just ramble off a list of, a bunch of pills, but I think having made like a Saaz Czech Pils and a Middle Fruit German Pils, and the pre-war is kind of new still, but we've been making those beers for 20 years, and since as of September of 2019, we're the last state. Finally, we can sell beer to go from the tap room, and that's allowed us to have a little outlet for trying stuff in 20 barrel sizes and pallet of quarter barrels on draft and 100 cases of beer out the door. And that's that if we can do that in a beer, and so any kind of variation of Pils that's we're gonna not fuck it up enough to where it'll be good. It may not be our favorite, we may use some hop and it's kind of like, that was kind of weird, but it's still fine. It's just like an experiment. So, but we're not making a 9% imperial pilsner or a red pilsner. We're just kind of changing the hops from middle fruit to Hume Malone, and maybe adding like 20% corn grits, and trying a new Polish hop, or trying the North Star raw malt, and maybe we'll get crazy and try a different lager yeast. Actually, tomorrow we're making a beer with Escarpment Labs. It's Pils with the Saaz strain yeast, which we thought our Czech Pils was until we had our yeast DNA sequence with the help of the university in town, and realized that our Czech lager strain was a Froberg strain, even though it behaves similar to what Saaz strain should be. Crappy processing of maltodextrose and a little less attenuative and a little diacetyl-y. Still a Froberg yeast though, so we got some 1513, the Unterhefe number 2 from Escarpment Labs, and we're brewing Czech Pils with the Saaz. We're using Slodek hops in this one, so there's no confusion. The Saaz is the yeast, not the hops, and that'll be fun to see. Different yeast. We'll see how diacetyl-y, maltodextrose lousy it is.
Sounds exciting.
It'll be drinkable.
Well, Dusan, thanks for joining me here on the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. It's been fun to talk about some of these more obscure lager styles, and some of the more fun and crazier smoked beers that you all make right here. G&D Chillers is the brewing industry's premier choice for glycol chilling. Set your compass by RAR North Star Pils. Get great quality and reliable supply from Old Orchard. Take full advantage of the enhanced marketing power of Brewery DB, and check the ABS commercial Facebook page to find out how to enter to win a Keg Viking. Of course, if you'd like to support this very podcast, go to beerandbrewing.com and click on the subscribe button. If you're a pro brewer, consider our new All Access Pro subscriptions that combine both of the magazines, exclusive online content, and more. Dusan, if people want to learn more about Live Oak Brewing, where do they find you in real life and on the interwebs?
Come to the brewery, and if you wander around in the back, we've got currently a 12-hole disc golf course, and I'm out there if it's not raining, so track me down and I'll buy you a beer, answer your questions.
It's a beautiful location out here on the Colorado River, right across from the Austin airport, which people may have noticed as they were listening with planes flying over us.
Packed full of live oaks, tons of shade in the summertime.
It's a bucolic and beautiful location out here, and a wonderful place to put back a few lagers, especially, or some 3% groats, which you can drink like water out here. But yeah, thanks for joining me on the podcast. Cheers.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com, or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.